The team sprinted uphill, dodging falling debris and occasionally swatting at angry plants that lashed out like offended animals. The lava surged forward relentlessly, moving far faster than was physically possible. Just as it seemed they might be overtaken, they reached a plateau. It was a bizarre sanctuary, offering a view that could have been stunning, if not for the overwhelming sense of menace in the landscape below. Below them, the lava flow suddenly halted, as though the planet had simply lost interest. "This planet's messing with us," Sylvia panted, still catching her breath. "It's like it knows we're here." Rill shot her a glare. "Don't humanize a death world," he said sternly. "That's how it gets to you." Rul, unfazed as always, grinned. "It's got character though. You can't help but respect it." "Respect's not exactly the word I'd choose," Theo muttered as the group paused to recover. A low growl rumbled from the nearby rocks, sending an icy chill down their spines. Everyone froze. "What now?" Dra Carroll hissed, his antennae twitching. The growl grew louder, and from behind a boulder emerged what could only be described as a twisted fusion of a bear, a porcupine, and a nightmare. Its spines glinted menacingly, and its eyes glowed with what Sylvia could only describe as judgment. "Well," she said, her hand reaching for her weapon, "this feels like Tasmania, but with more teeth." Rill chuckled. "I told you, Sylvia, nature's incredible." The creature let out a deafening roar. It looked at them with an expression that could only be described as annoyed hunger. Its spines shivered, sending out a faint hum like a chorus of bees warming up for a show. "Everyone stay calm," Rill whispered, though his trembling antenna betrayed his nervousness. "I am calm," Rul said cheerfully, crouching to get a better look. "Check out the pattern on its spines. Stunning. Could you stop admiring the death beast?" Sylvia snapped, already preparing her pulse blaster. The creature roared again, the sound reverberating through the air like it was shaking their very bones. With a surprising amount of force, it charged, moving with the clumsiness of a wrecking ball hurled from a cannon. "Move!" Sylvia yelled, rolling to the side as the creature charged past her. Dra Carroll clicked irritably, skittering up a boulder. "Why does it have spines if it just headbutts things? That's evolution's idea of redundancy. File a complaint with nature later," Theo growled, firing his energy rifle. The shot grazed the creature's side, and it spun around, clearly insulted. Sylvia, scrambling to her feet, shouted, "Aim for the glowing eyes. That's the weak spot." "Always?" Rill asked, ducking behind a tree as the creature charged again. "It's a universal rule," Sylvia replied, hitting one of the glowing eyes dead on. The creature howled in pain and fury, shaking its head violently. Rul, grinning like he was at an amusement park, lobbed a smoke grenade. "Let's confuse it. Surprise is nature's worst enemy." The creature paused, sniffing the air as the smoke canister exploded. It seemed to hesitate for a second before sneezing violently, sending spines flying in all directions. "Great plan," Theo muttered, pulling a spiked quill from his shoulder. Sylvia waved the team forward, signaling them to head for a narrow canyon. "We can trap it there. Move." The team sprinted toward the canyon entrance, dodging more flying spines as the creature followed, angrier than ever. They barely reached the opening before the beast lunged, its massive form wedging itself into the narrow passage. "It's stuck," Rul said with a laugh, leaning against the canyon wall. "For now," Rill replied, breathless. "Don't assume it'll stay that way." Dra Carroll began scanning the canyon walls with his handheld device. "The rock here's brittle. If we set charges, we can bring it down on the creature." Sylvia paused. "You mean bury it alive?" "Yes," Dra Carroll said calmly. "That's typically what bringing it down entails." Rul frowned. "It's not the creature's fault. It's just following its instincts." Sylvia stared at him. "So are we. Our instincts don't involve dying," Rill said, his voice sharp. "Less talking, more planting charges." Sylvia nodded, her resolve hardening. "Right, let's finish this." The team moved swiftly, placing explosives along the canyon walls while the creature growled and thrashed, pushing further into the narrow passage. "Is it getting closer?" Theo asked, glancing over his shoulder with mounting unease. "Yes," Rill replied. "Hurry up." As they placed the final charge, Sylvia clicked the detonator. "Everyone back!" The explosion rang out with a deafening roar, sending a shower of rocks tumbling down. Dust filled the air, and for a moment the team stood motionless, coughing and squinting through the haze. Once the dust settled, the creature lay buried under a mound of rubble, only its spines visible, sticking out like jagged markers. "Well, that's one way to handle things," Sylvia said, leaning against a boulder to catch her breath. Dra Carroll scanned the debris. "It's still alive under there, unconscious, but alive." "Of course it is," Rill muttered, "because nothing on this planet dies easily." As the team took a moment to recover, Glentis, who had been strangely quiet, gestured to a series of carvings on the canyon wall. "Look at this," he said, brushing away some dust. The carvings depicted strange humanoid figures surrounded by glowing symbols. Is that writing? Sylvia asked. It looks like it, Glentis replied, his mossy eyebrows furrowing. But it's not from any civilization we know. Ruel tilted his head, examining the symbols. This one looks a bit like hieroglyphs, and that reminds me of the Nazca lines. Sylvia frowned. Why does everything on this planet seem to remind us of Earth? That, Dra. Carroll said, his voice filled with unease, is an excellent question. The symbols glowed brighter as Glentis continued brushing the dust off, his mossy fingers trembling with excitement. These carvings are ancient. No tool marks, no signs of erosion. This shouldn't even exist in this environment. That's what you're focused on? Sylvia asked, squinting at the strange glow. Because I'm more concerned about why they're lighting up like a haunted karaoke machine. Ruel stepped closer, his hand grazing the largest carving, an oddly proportioned humanoid figure with what appeared to be a crown of flames. This guy looks like a deity, or maybe a politician. Careful, Dra. Carroll snapped, his mandibles clicking in agitation. We have no idea what touching that could trigger. I'll take my chances, Ruel replied with a grin, pressing his palm against the figure's chest. The ground rumbled ominously. Why do you always do the opposite of what I say? Dra. Carroll hissed, clutching his scanner tightly as the rumbling intensified. The Wong's Reverie was far from a model of cutting-edge design. Its outer hull was battered, as if it had survived countless collisions with flying debris, and its internal systems ran as reliably as a clock left in a rainstorm. Yet, for all its faults, it was exactly the kind of ship you'd expect for a human-led mission. Captain Rill, a thrall whose appearance could be best described as that of a sentient dried fruit, let out a long sigh as he studied the most recent system reports. Why do humans insist on giving their ships ridiculous names? He muttered under his breath, eyeing the absurd logo of a smiling marsupial painted on the dashboard. It's charming, Sylvia Honor, the human engineer, replied nonchalantly as she tightened a stubborn bolt on a malfunctioning piece of machinery. Charm is not covered in the Galactic Survival Manual, Rill retorted, his tone implying that if it were, the universe would have likely imploded by now. It's right under, don't panic, Sylvia shot back, flashing a playful grin. Before Rill could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life, announcing the voice of Dra. Carroll, the insectoid field scientist known for his constant skepticism. We're nearing the Class 14 planet. Prepare for final checks, everyone. And Sylvia, if your charm causes another breakdown, I'll personally launch it into space. Sylvia offered a lazy salute. Got it, boss bug. The planet grew larger in the viewport, its surface a surreal patchwork of contrasting landscapes. Rivers of molten rock intertwined with fields of razor-sharp ice, while a dense, almost impenetrable jungle gave way to a desert full of glistening, menacingly sharp crystals. As the ship touched down with a groan that seemed almost too deliberate, the crew gathered in the airlock. Alongside Rill, Sylvia, and Dra. Carroll, the team included 3 other individuals. Professor Glentis, a geologist covered in what looked like moss, overflowing with enthusiasm. Theo, a stoic pilot who radiated disapproval like a walking heater, and Ruel Monteverde, a cheerful biologist whose constant optimism seemed designed to grate on everyone's nerves. The airlock hissed open, revealing an environment that immediately assaulted the senses. The humidity hit like a heavy blanket, and the air carried a peculiar odor that Sylvia quickly identified as a mix of wet dog and barbecue sauce. Well, Rill said, stepping onto the alien soil and inhaling deeply. This reminds me of New Orleans during a summer heat wave. I don't know what that means, Dra. Carroll said, but I'm already regretting this. The crew scattered, their equipment buzzing with activity as it began to scan the surroundings. Sylvia knelt next to an unusual plant that appeared to be performing some form of yoga. This looks like something from the Amazon, Ruel remarked, poking at the ground with a stick. And this soil? Definitely minus Jarrus. Feels just like home. Does your home try to eat you? Theo asked, raising an eyebrow as the ground beneath Ruel suddenly shifted. Ruel jumped back just in time as thorny vines shot out of the earth, snapping like the jaws of a predator. Not literally, but it's the vibe, you know? Rill sighed. Why did I ever agree to this mission? Because the Galactic Union threatened to cancel your pension if you didn't, Sylvia said. I wasn't looking for an actual response, he muttered. Meanwhile, Glentis was crouching by a group of rocks that emitted a soft, eerie glow. These remind me of the crystal fields on Alpha Fendrick, except a lot more dangerous. The rocks seemed to take offense at his comment, beginning to emit a shrill, high-pitched hum. Well, that's a first, Sylvia remarked. Before anyone could respond, the hum from the crystals escalated into a deafening screech, and the rocks shot into the air, bouncing around like furious pinballs. The crew dove for cover. What kind of planet turns its mineral minerals into weapons. Rill shouted, pressing himself flat against a nearby boulder. A fun one, Rul quipped, laughing as he narrowly dodged a flying shard. When the chaos finally died down, the team regrouped near a towering tree that seemed to be glaring at them. This place is like Earth, Sylvia said, wiping dirt from her face. But worse, like Earth on its absolute worst day. I've seen worse, Rul replied cheerfully. Dra Carroll turned to him, his face a mask of utter disbelief. Where? Rill's silence following the question was as thick as a lead weight. The awkward pause could have been considered art in some circles. Sylvia silently decided that the first rule of surviving a death world was to stop asking what else could possibly go wrong because, inevitably, the universe would take that as a challenge. The team pressed on through the jungle, where the environment itself seemed intent on killing them. Thick, gnarled roots sprawled across the ground, tripping anyone who dared to look away for even a moment. The leaves above dripped a corrosive liquid that smelled faintly of acid and burned holes into their equipment as it splattered onto them. This canopy is absurd, Dra Carroll hissed, batting away a flying creature that resembled a cross between a hummingbird and a bee. Why does it drip acid? What purpose could that possibly serve? To keep us humble, Rill responded, swiping a branch out of his way. Sylvia, wiping a glowing substance off her visor, pointed ahead. Hey, there's a clearing up ahead. Maybe we can catch a break. The clearing, however, turned out to be a swamp, bubbling ominously, as though the planet itself was deciding whether to let them cross or just devour them whole. This, Theo declared, gesturing to the bubbling mud, is not a break. This is worse than the Okavango Delta in flood season. Rul cheerfully observed. Stop comparing everything to Earth. We get it. Earth is also horrifying, Rill snapped. Not horrifying, Sylvia fired back. Challenging, Rill deadpanned, his voice dripping with sarcasm, as if he were arguing with a malfunctioning autopilot. As the group carefully skirted the swamp's edge, Glentis abruptly stopped, crouching to inspect a patch of vibrant blue mushrooms. Fascinating, the geologist marveled, prodding one gently. The mushroom responded with a loud pop and a cloud of neon green spores that engulfed him. Oh no, Sylvia muttered, grabbing Glentis by the collar and yanking him back. You're glowing. Am I? Glentis asked, sounding delighted. How marvelous. No, not marvelous, Theo chimed in. Glowing is never a good sign. You look like a rave gone wrong, Sylvia added. As they continued, the ground grew more treacherous, littered with jagged rocks that seemed to have been placed specifically to cause the maximum number of stubbed toes. Sylvia's scanner began to beep insistently. Guys, the temperature's rising fast. She wasn't exaggerating. Within moments, the air became oppressively hot, and a distant roar echoed, soon followed by a deep rumbling sound. The team turned just in time to witness a wall of molten lava surging toward them, accompanied by a hiss that seemed to echo pure disdain. Run! Rill barked, scrambling forward. No one panics quite like a thrall, Sylvia muttered, following close behind. Before anyone could react, the wall beneath the carving cracked open with a deafening sound, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Sylvia glared at Rul. What is it with you and pressing random things? Are you secretly part cat? Rul shrugged. Curiosity keeps us alive, and sometimes it opens secret passages. This feels more like a trap than a passage, Theo said flatly, his expression unchanged. Rill groaned, rubbing his temples. We don't have a choice. Stay out here and the death world kills us. Go down there and at least it'll be interesting. That's the spirit, Sylvia said with a smirk, flicking on her flashlight. Let's see what's behind door number 1. The stairs were steep and uneven, and the air grew colder as they descended. The glow from the carvings above dimmed, replaced by faint, flickering lights embedded in the walls, lights that had clearly been untouched for millennia, yet still illuminated the darkness as if they'd just been installed. This is impossible, Glentis murmured, scanning the walls with mounting awe. These materials shouldn't have lasted this long. And the architecture, it's like a blend of Incan, Egyptian, and something I can't even begin to identify. Let's not forget creepy, Sylvia added, glancing over her shoulder. The creepy factor is key. The stairs finally opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling so high it vanished into the darkness above. At the center stood a colossal obelisk, its surface covered in more glowing symbols, encircled by a shallow pool of water that shimmered unnaturally. Great, Rill muttered. A glowing obelisk. Classic bad omen. Rul crouched next to the pool, studying the liquid. It's too reflective, like it's not even water. He dipped a finger in, and the surface rippled, distorting the reflection of the obelisk into impossible shapes. Stop touching things, Dra Carroll snapped, flailing one of his claws in exasperation. Before Rul could respond, the obelisk began to hum. Why does everything on this planet make noise? Theo muttered, raising his weapon. The hum hum grew louder, vibrating through the chamber until the air itself seemed to resonate. Symbols on the obelisk's surface began to shift, rearranging as though the stone were alive. "I don't like this," Rill said, stepping back slowly. "Not one bit." "Too late to back out now," Sylvia said, her gaze locked on the obelisk. "It's like it's trying to communicate with us." "What could it possibly be saying?" Dra. Carroll demanded. Almost as if it heard him, the hum abruptly ceased, replaced by a deep, echoing voice in a language none of them recognized. "What's it saying?" Rill asked, his voice laced with a mix of fear and irritation. "Wait," Glentis said, fiddling with his translator. "It's not Galactic Standard. No, it's similar to, oh no." "What?" Sylvia asked, her voice tight. "It's proto-terrestrial," Glentis replied, his mossy face blanching. "The root language of early Earth civilizations. This obelisk is speaking the mother tongue of humanity." The team stood frozen, staring at the obelisk, now pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. "So," Arwell said with a grin, "who wants to say hello?" The pulsing of the obelisk intensified, each beat accompanied by a low rumble that felt as though the planet itself was exhaling. The alien members of the team exchanged uneasy looks, but the humans, true to form, seemed more intrigued than scared. "This is officially weird," Sylvia said, taking a careful step forward. "Even by Earth standards?" Rill snapped, his antennae quivering. "This is terrifying by any standard. Stop moving toward it." Arwell ignored him as always. "If it's speaking proto-terrestrial, maybe it's trying to communicate. What should we respond with?" Theo asked, his weapon still aimed at the obelisk. "An apology for existing?" Glentis cleared his throat. "Actually, I've managed to isolate a basic phrase it's repeating. Something like, 'Why do you return?'" Glentis said, his voice filled with awe. "Return?" Sylvia repeated, her brow furrowing. "That doesn't make sense. Humanity's never been here before. Or so you think," Dra. Carroll muttered darkly, his claws twitching nervously. Sylvia glanced at him. "Got a theory you'd like to share with the class?" The insectoid hesitated. "There have been rumors, unsubstantiated of course, among xenoarchaeologists that early humans might have originated from a planet beyond Earth, a cradle world, if you will." Rill groaned. "Let me guess, this is that world?" "Possibly," Dra. Carroll admitted. "Fantastic," Rill said, throwing his hands up in disbelief. "We're standing on humanity's haunted nursery." As though on cue, the obelisk symbols shifted again, rearranging into the unmistakable shape of a humanoid figure. The voice boomed louder, more insistent now. "It's asking something else," Glentis said, his translator working furiously. "Something like, 'What have you learned?'" "Learned?" Arwell repeated, tilting his head. "Maybe it's a teacher, like a really old, really scary teacher." Sylvia snorted. "I had one of those in high school." She also glowed ominously. The obelisk suddenly flared with light, forcing the team to shield their eyes. When the brightness faded, the pool of liquid began to ripple violently, and an image emerged. It showed Earth, or at least a version of it. Towering forests, sprawling cities, and oceans gleaming under a golden sun. But the scene rapidly shifted into chaos. Storms, raging fires, and humans, always humans, enduring it all. "Is it showing us Earth's history?" Theo asked, lowering his weapon. "Not just history," Sylvia said, her voice quiet for once. "It's showing us resilience." As if in agreement, the voice spoke again, sending chills down their spines. "You are the children of chaos, born to adapt, built to survive." The obelisk fell silent, and the chamber seemed to hold its breath. "Well," Rill said, finally breaking the silence, "that's horrifyingly flattering." "Wait!" Rill suddenly shouted, pointing to the pool. The liquid was swirling again, forming what looked like a map of a new planet. It glowed brightly at its center. "What's that?" Sylvia asked, squinting at the image. Glentis examined it closely. "Coordinates. It's pointing us somewhere," Theo asked, his voice a mix of dread and resignation. "Probably," Arwell said with a grin. "But don't you want to know why?" Sylvia turned to Rill, whose expression was caught between panic and reluctant curiosity. "You're the captain," she said. "What do we do?" Rill sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Against my better judgment, should we follow the map? But if this leads to another obelisk, I'm resigning." As the team prepared to leave, the obelisk pulsed one last time, and a single phrase echoed through the chamber. "You are ready?" Arwell laughed as they began climbing back up the stairs. "Ready for what?" "More trouble," Sylvia smirked. "But hey, at least we're good at it." Dra. Carroll, clicking irritably, muttered. "That is not a comforting thought." As the team emerged back into the oppressive heat and chaos of the Deathworld, the hostile vegetation and buzzing predators seemed a little less daunting. The planet wasn't just trying to kill them. It had been testing them, and they had passed.